Hey everybody, and welcome to today's video in which we're going to have a bit of a different format than the rest of our tutorials. Namely, today we're going to take a look at something that's very general for anybody who's doing any sort of either 3D rendering or photography, and that is understanding how to use color. As rendering artists, we have a lot of tools available to us when we are creating our renders. And we need to know about lighting, we need to know about exposure, and color is just another one of those tools that we have to have in our arsenal. So if we're gonna talk about colors, we might as well start from the start. There are actually three orders of color. You have primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. Now, when working with RYB color, which is the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. And this is really different from the RGB that we use. That to say is that there are only three pure colors, and from which all other colors are derived. So basically, we call them primary colors because they are pure colors. They're not created by combining other colors. At the same time, a secondary color is basically a 50-50 combination of any two primary colors. An example for this would be if we mix the basic red and yellow, and we would get the orange. And now, at the end, we have the tertiary colors. Now, these can be a 25-75 mix or a 75-25 combination of a primary color and a secondary color. An example for this would be if we mix up the blue and green, and we would get the turquoise color. But actually, colors do have a certain temperature to them. Namely, if we take a look at our image above, we're going to see that they basically have two types of tones: the cool tones and the warm tones. The difference between these is that the warm tones or the warm colors remind us of things that are like fire or the sun or wheat, and they are generally full of heightened emotion, and generally they give us more joy and they give more energy to the place. While at the same time, the more cold or the cool tones will make spaces look calmer and more relaxed, so to speak. But knowing just the theory behind colors doesn't really mean much to us, especially if we're gonna want to go ahead and decorate an interior or an exterior for a scene. So, when we're decorating something, we choose what to do with the colors, and we choose which color goes on which wall and which furniture and curtains and so on and so on. So we're essentially creating a color scheme. So when we're being intentional with the colors in our image, color scheme comes into play. Now there are a couple of very popular color schemes, and we will take a look at all of them individually, and it will help us that we're going to be looking at the RYB color wheel at the same time. The first color scheme that we're going to talk about is the analogous color harmony. And this is a group of colors that lie directly adjacent to each other on the color wheel. This group of colors can have a limited spread of just two colors, or can spread further along on as much as half of the entire color wheel. Although at this point or further, it will start to lose its identity as an analogous harmony. The second color scheme that we're going to take a look is the complementary color scheme. This color scheme is comprised of two colors that lie directly across from each other on the color wheel. The spread of color on either side can be increased to a degree to include more colors on either end. A common complementary color scheme can be found in nature, and that is of warm and cool combination. The cool bluish tones mixed with some warm orangey tones. Next one, we're going to take a look at split complementary. Now, this is achieved by taking two colors that lie directly adjacent to one of the colors in a complementary color harmony. and you get a split complementary harmony. This is a bit more difficult harmony to utilize, but can be very useful in certain situation, and especially it can be useful for exteriors, as you can see on the image above. The monochromatic color scheme is comprised of one color with varying values. This means that we can have varying degrees of brightness or varying degrees of saturation in the images. Most typically, this color harmony is what a modern day black and white image would be. The triadic color scheme is basically combining three colors equally spaced from each other on the color wheel. This color scheme is very similar to a split complementary, and in the context of a landscape photograph where a single color in an image can often span over a slight range of that color. What is very interesting about this sort of a color scheme is that it can be easily recognized by a very vibrant choice of colors, and it's making the interiors or exteriors look very alive and vibrant. The quadratic or rectangle actually is combining four colors that have a rectangular spatial relations on the color wheel. This is often also referred to as a double complementary because it is the combination of two complementary color harmonies. Now, for example, if we take a look at the image provided here, we can see that the two complementary color harmonies, the blue of the sky complements the orange of the foliage, while the green of the brush is basically complementing the pinkish reds of the clouds. The dyad combination is combining two colors that are separated by two hues of color along the color wheel, constituting a dyadic color harmony. This harmony has some flexibility since it is difficult to quantify what exactly makes up a single hue of color. Knowing this, a single color can vary in two different ways: brightness and saturation. Different amount of brightness and saturation will create versions of a single color that exists between black and white. By looking at three-dimensional version of a color wheel, we can see that the top represents variance in saturations, whereas the middle of the circle completely white where there is no color saturation. At any point on the top, if you begin to remove brightness, moving down on the y-axis, the color becomes darker and eventually becomes black. The second image shows a typical color picker in Photoshop, which represents taking a slice out of the pie for any particular hue. Left to right movement represent changes in saturation, whereas up and down represents brightness. A combination of these variants of a single color are what would make a monochromatic color harmony as described previously in the video. One place where it's especially important to note about colors is when you get to the point where you start post-processing your images or your renders. This is where you have total control on how a color can be presented. Colors with full brightness and varying levels of saturation will feel light, airy, and colorful, whereas colors with decreasing saturation and brightness will make the entire room feel darker and eventually more muddy as they become less saturated. So, as we can see, color is very powerful. It can make an image shine and wow a viewer, and also it can ruin a good image if it is not handled correctly. So developing a good eye for color takes time and a lot of practice. So with this, we are basically finished with the color theory video. So generally, I hope you guys had fun and you managed to learn something new from this video. If you would like to support me, you can click on the join button and the direct links will be in the description below. And the most helpful thing you can do is click the like and subscribe buttons and comment in the video below. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.